As Mr. Davis always says, let's get to business right on time. So I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Nash-Rocky Mount Public Schools Board of Education and Nash County Board of Commissioners, Current Expense and Capital Outlay Joint Committee meeting. And I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you to all who have taken time from your busy schedules to come so that we can address concerns for both boards. And we're going to go on and begin with a Williford update from Dr. Shelton Jeffries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. At the last Board of Education meeting, staff was authorized to finalize the plans for the Williford transformation. There are several components to the plans that will help us to adjust the needs of students at Williford Elementary School. First is a plan to alter the school configuration. Currently, the school serves students in pre-K through 5th grade. The Board of Ed approved my request to reassign students in grades 3 through 5 to 3 sister schools that are within a 4-mile radius of Williford Elementary. This will begin 2018-19. Those 3 schools are Inglewood, Johnson, and Baskerville. We'll have an increased early literacy focus. Williford will house approximately 7 pre-K classes next year. In addition to that increased number of pre-K classes, there will be increased curricular supports and staff to assist. A school-based health clinic will be embedded in partnership with OIC. Williford will house a fully functional health clinic to serve both students and the surrounding community. The school-based health clinic will offer both physical and mental health services. And lastly, extracurricular programming. In partnership with Boys and Girls Club, Williford will extend the day by offering high-quality tutorial support along with extracurricular programming to include a STEM support via an on-site makerspace. For those that are unfamiliar, a makerspace is a dedicated place to engage in inquiry and experimentation for students. We anticipate providing 3D printers and tools of that nature. As a result of sending cohorts of students to the 3 sister schools, Inglewood, Johnson, and Baskerville, we've applied for turnaround support via the restart model for protection for those schools. Inglewood, Johnson, and Baskerville have been identified for restart model applications. If approved by the State Board of Education, these schools will reopen as inquiry centers for the 2019-20 academic year. The transformation will be supported through utilization of the Dyslexia Center framework, and quite simply, they focus on giving tools and strategies for high-quality lesson design and school standards that promote increased student engagement. If approved by the State Board, 2018-19 will serve as a planning year for these schools, with implementation year 1 beginning in 2019-2020. The applications were before the State Board in May for discussion. They will be up for approval at the June session. I'll take any questions.
Yes, number 1, back to after-school configuration. You're moving grades 3 through 5 out to the 3 suggested schools. Will Williford take on any additional students that pre-K on up through 2?
They're going to have an increased number of pre-K students that are close to the number that we're transitioning out. The composition of the school in terms of numbers will be pretty close.
And this configuration that we are using, it is already implemented in our schools. For example, at Winstead, they have grades pre-K through 2. And then when they go 3 through 5, they go over to Inglewood. So this is not something that's different. It's something that is already in place in the system.
Same thing as Red as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And like Johnson too. Johnson's basically the same way.
Doesn't it make, wouldn't it then make Williford a non-testing school?
Yes.
So what is the impact of that on the state's?
The impact is Williford is removed forever from consideration for ISD.
Because you made them a K-2 school.
Correct.
They call it end around.
I wouldn't say that, sir. I would say that it meets, the design that we presented meets the best needs for the community and the school.
And where you move those two, I'm sure there are plenty of seats to move those into those schools.
Yes, sir.
Does that still leave any capacity in those other three schools?
We have capacity that's comparable to our other elementary schools.
Excuse me, Ms. Wilkins.
Going down to 2018, 2019 will serve as the planning year for these schools. Now, that doesn't mean that they are going to be operating and functioning as the normal other schools will operate.
No, sir. It actually
But
means
that's
it'll be
gonna be a
it'll be a
year.
regular year, but under the structure of the transformation
I got it.
models, the
got it.
protections begin that year. So we'll be transitioning these cohorts of students into the school that have historically been challenged. They'll have the protections of indoctrinating them into the new culture, working on those plans for those students, and the protections start year one, during the planning year. So they're equivalent to 4 years of protection for those sister schools.
For example, those that are second graders there now will be the third graders that move up. The third graders will become the fourth will become the fifth as they go to their new schools. And Dr. Jeffries has been over to the school staff meeting to explain it to the staff members at Williford,
Yes, ma'am.
so that they understand they'll be protected and they will have jobs and they will have first choice in placement as to where they would like to be transferred to, in order to increase morale. Because when we first started with this, they started at the beginning of the school on a high, and then just as they were excited about it, then we come in that they're being taken over. So all the air went out of the balloons, so all year they've been trying to play catch up. And I went to visit them yesterday on Teacher Appreciation Day, and I must say, I was really impressed with the staff, the school. They were all, matter of fact, I went to 5 schools yesterday, and I was really impressed as to what is going on in all of our schools. Everybody's working so hard.
And the questions I asked Dr. Jeffries is just to educate us, because believe it or not, the Board of Commissioners get asked a tremendous amount of questions.
Oh, I believe that.
And same way with our hospitals, they get tested when we ask them any questions, but they gotta understand that the average citizen doesn't even know there is a hospital board. So
Right.
when there's a problem, they call us. But to educate ourselves, the pre-K, what does that do to your early childhood over there? Do you remove some students out of that? Does that population get smaller, or are you really not changing that?
No, district-wide, you can come on in there. District-wide, we anticipate increasing pre-K slots across the district. But what it'll mean there is the classes that are embedded will still have that complement, but will grow to about 7. That would really make it a pre-K center because of the number, and what that helps us with is in terms of professional development and working on early literacy skills. Not only will that pre-K team benefit from that, but all of the teachers that will understand the strategies that help promote literacy, because we struggle, and not only in pre-K, but in kindergarten and first grade with students that aren't ready and fluent readers.
And I'm sure I'm just misinformed, or really didn't know, not misinformed, but the early childhood, what percent of our pre-K students in the system went to that particular facility prior to this one, or right now? Is it not a very large percentage, or not?
It's not a large percentage, but I'll have to get those numbers. I'll bring it to the next meeting.
Well, I don't know that I really need to know the number, but for some reason I thought all of them did, except for a few exceptions. I know we got a few out at one of the elementary schools, Cedar Grove, or Swift Creek. Cedar Grove, I think we had a few pre-K there.
We have several schools in the other end of the county that have pre-K
Okay.
presentations. We're not moving
Okay.
those because of the logistics. just the ones that would be in proximity of being able, we're not gonna put any undue hardship on the parents to be able to transport.
And what does this do to staffing at Williford? Does quite a bit of those have to move? to another school?
Right now, in grades 3, 4, and 5, there are 9 teaching positions. So those positions will follow the kids to their new schools. But fortunately, with natural attrition, folks who are already planning on moving on,
Right.
and affording transfer priority to those folks, it may be that we transfer 3 vacancies to each of the receiving schools. Does that make sense?
Yes,
It
sir.
may not be actual teachers, but the way we're prioritizing it is gonna be those who've already requested transfers. We're gonna prioritize and then ask for volunteers, and then we're gonna, if there are remaining positions, it'll be based upon seniority. So the hope is that through natural attrition and folks who wanna seek and volunteer to look for another opportunity, we'll be able to accommodate them and then give 3 new clean vacancies to the schools. If not, we have a process to identify staff that will follow those students that they've served previously.
And I understood your statement, it just removes us from that possibility at Williford, which I deem to be very positive. Does it give any more likelihood to the 3 schools that we're moving to maybe possibly fall under that program? Or is that why you have them already in the restart?
So that's a very nuanced question. The answer to the question is yes. When you talk about a cohort of 60 to 70 students who have a history of underperformance, not all of them, but there are some, the potential for that having an impact on the receiving school is great. And that was the reason for pursuing the protections that will be afforded for 4 years under the restart model.
Because those, I don't have it in my head, but I've seen the number, those schools have fairly low grades
Those,
anyway.
the 2 of the schools are D schools, so yes, but they've met growth or exceeded growth, so they have strong, and Johnson has one of the strongest intervention processes in the district, but again, receiving a cohort of students in such a short time frame can be a challenge to schools, so that's why we're gonna afford them this protection if approved.
Well, it just stares me in the face that your real challenge is made more difficult when you take into account trying to keep a student as close as you can to their home. It limits the flexibility that you got to try to blend the students, which we all know blending students helps one another learn. And you're almost handcuffed in that respect to an extent by the concept of neighborhood schools.
I wouldn't frame it as handcuffed, Commissioner, but you're right. You're very astute in your assessment.
Well, you have a lot more vocabulary words, a lot more words in your vocabulary than I do.
Mrs. Silver makes fun of me all the time for that. But you raise a really salient point, because I feel that when we're having this discussion, we're very much having the discussion about OR Pope. Folks who wish they would have weighed in then are weighing in on this, and it's a separate issue. We're not closing Williford.
Right.
When you talk about saving Williford, we're trying to do that every single day. We're trying to keep it under the auspices of our Board of Education. We're not closing it, but in the view of some community stakeholders, it's one and the same. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I'm sure glad we are saving.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And some are still not convinced, even one or two that work there. So they keep asking me, what do you know? What do you know?
Yeah, my mother was famous for telling me, God rest her soul, that to a bank robber, everybody looks like a crook. I haven't robbed any banks, and I think my integrity speaks for itself. I haven't misrepresented myself, but if folks still perceive that, I believe that's more their issue than mine. I'll be held accountable by the Board of Education for the recommendations and decisions that I lead the district toward, but I'm confident in the research that we put behind these recommendations, and I believe that it will improve all of the schools in question.
And I think the main question that commissioners are going to receive is, are we closing Williford School? And the answer will be, no, we're not closing Williford School, to get that answer out there. And on Thursday, the 10th, we will be presenting to that community our plans for Williford School. And we're really excited about the school-based health clinic, because many of those students have to lose a lot of seat time because of doctor's appointments, etc. At least having the school-based clinic there will be opportunities for them to receive medical help right there without their parents having to leave work, come get them, take them to the doctor's office, then bring them back. And then we look at the pre-K. There's shots that they have to have. Many of them have had to be suspended because they did not have their shots. But here with the school-based health clinic, they'll be able to have their shots right there at the school, and we'll be able to accept Medicaid and Medicare for them on the premises. So that's going to really increase seat time, and seat time increases academic success.
Is there a projection? Excuse me.
No,
You
go
had your
ahead.
hand up. You were-
No, finish
Please.
that conversation.
No, I won't do that. I saw your hand go. Go ahead, please.
Ms. Buller?
Well, I just wanted to say to Mr. Bellfield's point is that there will always be some naysayers. There are always gonna be some folk who don't want to change.
Yes, ma'am.
On every subject.
On any subject you can come up with, there will be those people. But when we know that we are trying to do the very best that we can for the students that we serve, then we have to hope that those naysayers will see the good and come on and get on the bandwagon and help us make this good move happen.
Yes, ma'am.
But I doubt that we will ever have 100% support on anything that we do. In any human relationship, you will have some folk who are going to be negative.
Yes, ma'am.
This week is a prime example of some decisions we made.
Yes.
I would just like to say that the part about the health thing really, it really inspires me, because when the years that I spent as principal of Edwards Middle School, mental health was a big issue, and we had almost 1,200 students. So there were issues all the time, and we would get, our counselors would work with the parents to get appointments, mental health, and it was behind the hospital at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And invariably, the kids wouldn't go, because they didn't have anybody to take them. So they missed their time. And then to get them another appointment, weeks go by before they do that. And then we try to get somebody to get them transportation there. So having all this under one roof will be a tremendous help to that community. It just, you can't even imagine the help that would be, just the mental health piece of it alone. Not let alone the seat time and all those things. The other part of it is I mean, that's my district, Inglewood School area, that's my district. I was a little bit reluctant when I first heard that they were going to move 70 students into Inglewood School, knowing that they, over the last couple of years, they were borderline. One year they were low performing, one year they weren't. And sending that many high-risk kids in there would be hard. But when you look at the big picture, and the fact that we didn't inherit this legislation came. When Dr. Jeffries came here, he came here to do the best he could with what he had. And I appreciate that. The part that I know in working in transforming schools, low performing schools as a consultant 7 or 8 years ago, is it takes more than 1 year to transform a school. And it takes at least 5 to 7 years. And there's no way that we could have met that legislation where we were at Williford School. We would be right back this fall in another year of them trying to take it over again. So the reality of it is that's basically, I support that whole process for them.
Any more
I
questions,
think
Ms.
those-
Billfield?
I was seeing a couple of people that work there. I think that I'm just guessing the way they spoke to me about it was they were just concerned is will it going to still be a school?
That's good.
Yeah,
Well, they
that's-
will be, so we can assure them there will be a school at Williford.
Mr. Shaw?
I would just like to make the recommendation to invite the county commissioners to the meeting tomorrow night. the best practical application for you to answer the question you have, just to be on hand. As my chair would say, boots where? On the ground. So it's easy to talk, we can talk about, but there will be action. Mr. Belfield, the community will be there tomorrow at what time, Dr. Jefferson?
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. So I would invite this entire board to come and participate and collaboratively work together so they can see a unity between this board and the county commissioners, not just in this room, but out in the district as well.
It's not at Wilford School, it's at South Rocky Mass Community Center.
Thank you.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow,
Yes, sir.
no,
Tomorrow night,
tomorrow night, oh, the week is going so fast, Ms. Davis.
Yeah, I got a contract.
Has there been a projection of what the cost for this health clinic will fall back on the school system?
Right now, it's in alignment with our operations for this current year. OIC and Boys and Girls Club are full funding partners in this, so they're bringing to bear the resources with the programming features that they're going to be adding. Boys and Girls Club has also secured a benefactor to help with the facilities upgrades at the school. So this is at zero cost to the district over our current investment at the school.
Ms. Silver?
This is for Mrs. Wilson, she had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Now, I just wanted to mention, really to Mr. Belfield, Dr. Jeffries, you met with the staff at Williford on Monday, right? And
Yeah, Ms.
spoke
Ed
to
shared
them.
that with them.
Oh, okay, I'm
that
sorry.
we
All right,
had.
just,
Thank you for making it.
I'm sorry, I
We
was
did.
late.
Okay.
So the answer was there will not be any cost to the school system for the projection of this coming year.
No, sir. My answer was the investment in the school system is comparable to the investment we have this year. We'll have the same cost. We won't incur any increases with embedding these. No cost means it costs us several million to have Williford Elementary School this year. We'll have the similar cost next year, but we don't incur any increased costs or investment as a result of adding the school-based health clinic or adding the programming features that Boys and Girls Club will be partnering with.
So we're not gonna spend any more money than we
Than
we
we
would
currently
have
do.
spent if they were not there,
Correct.
if these two programs were not there.
And you'll have basically the same number of students
Yeah,
there.
the student composition will be comparable.
What class size talking about for these 7 pre-K classes next year, what size?
I'll have to give you, but those classes are fixed, Commissioner, with the pre-K classes. I'll bring those to you to the next meeting, let you know exactly
That's
how
not
many.
necessary, it's not for me. But I'm just wondering if your
Legislators
plans were
mandate how
to-
many you can have in those classes.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I was thinking about.
And there's
smaller
a teacher
classes.
assistant, well, you're
Yes.
talking about 2 professionals. There's a teacher and a teacher assistant associated with those classes, but they're fixed.
Okay.
What does the makeup of the employment at healthcare look like? What positions will be in there? Is it a nurse?
Right now, we're finalizing the memorandum of understanding, so we'll roll those out at a later date, but that hasn't been finalized at this point.
Are there any more questions?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
One of the things I like to also, so this is a model that's not new. We went down, had an opportunity to visit Wilmington a few months back. to
New
see-
Hanover.
New Hanover, to see
Hanover.
this model. And the model is probably one of the best in the state.
Without
Oh,
question.
yeah, so-
And they've been doing it for 15 years.
So, and I just like to applaud Dr. Jeffers to take an initiative to lead this direction, this direction.
More questions on the Williford update?
Just one more comment to what Mr. Sharp said. If we could get a routine of some way possibly getting an email of all these meetings y'all have like this, that you are willing for us to attend when the dates are set.
Okay.
I agree with you. It's got to show some cooperative effort between the two boards if when we are able to attend something like that. And believe it or not, I can certainly attend a meeting like that and sit on the back row and not say anything, and use my learning process.
That's,
But if we could just routinely get notices of meetings like that when you send it to them, the ones you'd be willing for us to be, I'd greatly appreciate it.
We'll make a note to send those to the county manager.
That's fine, he'll sure get it to us.
Even though you may not say anything, it's your presence that tells them that we are working.
I can't help but think
together.
to, I hadn't thought about it, but certainly what he said certainly made a lot of sense to me, yes.
Any more questions, comments? Then we will move to item 3, Northern Elementary update.
We have received, we're still in the process of scheduling the invitation-only stakeholder meetings. It was more difficult than I anticipated. We have about 25 recommendations of community members. That's a good problem to have. We are communicating via email, via phone. Mrs. Lucas is working vigorously to set two dates with those groups. We anticipate about 30 minutes of presentation from staff and then opening up for question and answer. After those initial meetings, we're working simultaneously on venues out in the respective areas to host the town halls. So we are making an adjustment to that originally projected schedule. We'll get that information out to everyone once we finalize with the invitees.
Now, which of those meetings are y'all willing for commissioners to be at?
We're asking to have a small presence at the invitation only meetings, just because we do not want those to be open meetings. But at the town halls, our board, we have an open invitation to everybody that wants to attend. But we are making an invitation to your staff to be present at all. So Mr. Davis is going to coordinate with your representative that he worked with historically.
Okay. And so you haven't had any of those yet?
We haven't, and you'll get ample notice
Okay.
once we secure the venues out in the areas.
Any
We had
questions?
original timeline, like he said, we had original timeline.
It was
And I
aggressive.
believe I gave you those dates,
You
but
did, yeah,
we're
okay.
adjusting those dates
Okay.
because the thing that we have a number of people. You know, we thought maybe we'd have 6 or 7, but we've got 25 names that our board members have collectively sent to
It's a
your
very active
Dr.
area.
Jeffrey's office, yeah.
Any more comments, questions? Budget update, Mr. Davis.
I'm gonna turn that over to Mr. Lamb.
Okay.
Or
Okay.
whatever, how he sees fit.
Be glad to take this. Right now, the schedule is for the budget to be presented to the commissioners on the 21st, which is Monday, the 21st of May. After the presentation, there will be a public hearing on June the 4th. After the public hearing, the commissioners can, at that time, recommend changes, can vote on it at that time, or can vote on it at any time after that date, but must vote on it, as y'all must, on, I guess, y'all's budget, June the 30th. Right now, it appears that we're gonna be appropriating about $500,000 more from fund balance than we did last year for general operations. Revenues are about the same, using the same formulas to estimate those revenues. And with increased spending, it looks like we're gonna have to appropriate about $500,000 more in fund balance than we did last year.
I'm sure their interest level is where we're sitting at currently with the Google request.
Okay.
Of course, commissioners have not taken action on it, but we have given you direction what to work towards the
Right.
final presentation to us. If you're prepared to
Sure,
go over
sure.
that, I'm sure that's where their interest is.
Sure. The commissioners at their work session, budget work session last Monday, I believe it was, last Friday. No, when was that?
30.
The 30th,
It was on
yeah,
the
last
Monday.
Monday,
It was on the Monday.
Monday a week ago.
Right.
They considered several requests. They voted based upon an estimated 3% increase in salaries at the state level for teachers, and an estimated $6 million that we have been part of in supplements. They recommended $180,000 increase to help with the teacher supplement situation. And that's not increasing the 10% supplement, but simply providing extra funds so that those supplements are paid for with new monies. That the increased 3% that is anticipated from the state. So it ended up being a $180,000 increase over this year's school budget.
And if the state should allot more than 3%, I feel it's the intent of our board to put the monies there to keep the supplement at 10%. So if the state were to allot 6%, it would be double that amount. It's an unknown to us, but we had to give them a number to put in there. So a few nights prior to that, in meeting with our local representatives and senators, we got a feel that it was gonna be probably in the 3% range increase for classroom teachers, and that's the number we use to base the budget increase on.
So
But that could change.
So every percent would be $60,000.
Mrs. Dahl?
Was any consideration given at that budget discussion to provide increases for the salaries that the state would increase at 3% of those local employees that we pay, like our maintenance workers and those kind of things? The salaries and benefits will be significant. Just to pay the supplements of 3% for the teachers, that's really good, and we appreciate that. But we still have the burden of coming up with those increases for the salaries. And 80% of our budgets, all of our budgets, are salaries and benefits. Might be more closer to 85%. And so that really handicaps us in terms of trying to find new monies. And it's going to necessitate us looking at, as Dr. Jeffrey says, some bone, taking something off the bone rather than any fat that was ever there that I've not seen. But was there any discussion about that?
The end results from the Board of Commissioners was that we would do the increased funding for classroom teachers, directed to classroom teachers only.
The supplement. They keep it at 10%.
Yes, sir. But it was related to it was specific for classroom teachers.
And what about assistant principals? We're at 8% with them. And the fact that we moved most of our assistant principals back to 10 months means that our assistant principals are going to make less supplements than the teachers. So there's not a real, in fact, we moved them to 10 months, there's not a real incentive for us to grow future leaders when they're going to lose money to become an assistant principal. And assistant principals, I was one for 8 years, is a 24/7 job. Not that teachers aren't a 24/7 job. I had a wife that was a teacher 34 years, and I know. But we appreciate what you do for teachers, and that's commendable. But somewhere along the line, I think our assistant principal has been left out in the cold. And I know there was a discussion in the paper, I saw in the paper an article that we felt like that we were overfunding our assistant principals. And to me, that's a safety issue. And I know we've been overfunding assistant principals as far as the state allotted formula ever since we merged. Susan will tell you that we've moved some of those funds from local money to state money, back from state money to local money, to continue to have those extra assistant principals, especially in our most vulnerable schools, our middle schools that have high-risk students. And to go back in there and say that, and compare us with Wilson County or Edgecombe County, we've always done this. And I think that we would be really cutting, I've heard the county commissioners consistently say, we don't want to cut back on safety. If you take assistant principal out of our schools, to make sure that we're just at the state allotted positions, I think we would be making a grave mistake.
Ms. Wilson?
Let me ask,
Okay.
ask a specific
Oh,
question.
I'm
sorry.
We'll answer.
Right, thank you.
There was discussion about principals, assistant principals, and I'm only today can relate to you what our board did that day, and our
Yes, sir.
board went back to funding classroom teacher increase is only a supplement that goes along with that. Of course, as you said, there was some discussion about the number, not what we paid assistant principals, but the number of assistant principals
Right.
we had. But the discussion, you know, that's for y'all's decision. I mean, we can't get into how what you did with money, but there was a note made of how many assistant principals we have. Yes, sir. Excuse me.
Ms. Wilson?
Now I forgot what I'm just, I remember what I was gonna say. To piggyback on what Wayne was saying, the assistant principal decision on the part of our district to have more than what state pays for has been very intentional and over a period of time. In fact, when we cut our assistant principals back, many of them back to 10 months last year, one of the big discussions that I heard from many board members was, as long as we aren't, and honestly, those are the school-based administrators who've been there and had their boots on the ground for many years, as long as we're not gonna have schools, we already have one, Cedar Grove, but other schools without assistant principals in there. As a parent, I understood that. You know, we would probably be looking at the vast majority of our middle schools, I believe, and I'm guessing, Susan, you may be able to answer, that would have one assistant principal. I don't know the impact on our high schools, but as a parent, the idea of having these school-based administrators in the building, they take a lot off of those teachers in terms of discipline, in terms of curriculum. Some of our APs are experts in curriculum and provide a lot of assistance in the classroom. It concerns me that we're starting, and I understand the budget is very narrow, but it concerns me that we're starting to actually really focus on school-based people and school-based personnel as a parent in our school system. And that it may be a this or that. And I understand the narrow times that we're in, but I'm concerned about our kids. I'm concerned about having to make that decision if we're gonna be able to have more people in our classroom. Sorry, we've gotta cut out these administrators. I'm concerned about safety in our schools, very frankly. I hope that that's something that this group can collectively talk about openly. I wish we had had the opportunity to talk about that AP issue before seeing it in the newspaper, very honestly, because I think you would have heard that from me as a parent, heard that from school-based administrators, that this is really something purposeful that we've done. And we're not doing it to take away from classroom teachers. We're really doing it because we think they play an extremely important role in our schools that helps classroom teachers, that helps the academic environment that we are providing for kids. So I guess what I want to say in all of that is those are the types of discussions that I hope we can have in this setting that will help us as we go forward to talk about kind of the dilemma that we're in. I mean, to piggyback also what Wayne said, I mean, as I look back and I listen to everything, to me, the big picture of what we're having to do now is we're having to absorb $1.2 million of increases in salary and benefits and supplements. And the only way to absorb that with flat funding is to make programmatic cuts. And because 80 to 85% of our budget is salary and benefits, that means people. And we do need people in central office, but as a parent, when I started seeing school-based people having to be cut because of this, it really, really concerns me for our school system and the quality of the education that we can provide our kids, which then concerns me for our community overall. We all know we need to have strong schools for economic development, and I just hope that as we move and have this discussion ongoing, that we can talk about these issues openly so that we can always focus on the big picture and not narrow our focus too much on different issues, but step back and look at overall what it is we need to be able to serve the function that we are trying to serve.
Mr. Davis?
Wendy, I think what I'd like to see us do when we are not together on a point like this, if to automatically put it on an agenda moving forward, because I feel like even though I started this in my mind as a capital meeting, we very quickly before the first meeting made the current spend and capital.
Right.
So to work through these, we stick it on the next agenda, and then we come prepared to have a discussion. The discussion we had that day, very briefly, was along the line of the number of assistant principals you had, the total cost of administration. I remember some things about principal mentors, and the concern of our board has just been the total number of employees versus the total number of classroom teachers, and what all those other people do, and whether they're truly necessary, or should we try to put more into the classroom teachers. But there again, we are a funding agency, and we just gotta work through these ideas. Let us tell you what our board thoughts are, and then y'all tell us where we're wrong. We take criticism very well, and at the end of the day, we can be convinced that more funds are needed. I think our board is certainly willing to listen and work along these lines, and rather than 2 times a year, or really only 1 time a year to concentrate on budget, I feel like this is what this venue is about, and hopefully we can do that. A budget time, and Mr. Lamb will keep me under the table even though his legs aren't quite that long, but budget time is to set a starting point. There's any time you can do additional appropriations throughout the year to any department we got, and though y'all are not a department, you are a funding entity that we fund.
Ms. Belfield?
That's an issue I think that we really need to revisit about our principals and assistant principals. The amount that you all presented to us, I think was what, 135,000, I believe.
That's a hold harmless just for the principals.
Yeah, just for the principals.
Just for the principal. The assistant principals were not part of any of that.
Okay, all right.
That's a whole different entity.
They were, it was principals and APs, that hold harmless was.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I thought. But anyway, I was in favor of that, and I did push it. And I just believe, and of course I didn't get what I was after, but I believe it's an issue that we can still, I think we can work on. So I don't think the door is closed, but we need to work on it.
Personally, I like the challenge of this discussion. The fact that we were able to sit down as a group and discuss these things. I mean, if we can educate you all, the more we can. The presentation that we had formally doesn't answer all your questions, and it's hard in that kind of an arena to really get your feelings out there and to be able to challenge each other. And we hear, every time we get together, we hear things that we might be able to go back and look at certain things and do certain things differently. But the whole thing is you guys are a funding agency. But we're the stewards for the money, and you've got to trust us that we're making the kind of decisions we need to make. But I know for my own budget, I'm on a fixed income. And if I've been on a fixed income for 5 years, and that's what we've been, and we constantly are getting these increases from the state, and that's been good. It's been good for our teachers, and it's been good. That money's not following us. We're taking money, we're continuing to cut, and we're going to continually have to cut. And the bottom line is, we're all concerned about, everybody in this room I know is concerned about that we're a low performing school district. And we're in the bottom 5 And we know that funding helps, and our high-risk population needs extra funding and extra support. And we're just asking, is there any way that you can look at your budget and increase it? I know, we appreciate that 180,000. I mean, that is really good that you're going to continue to support our teachers and that supplements. But I think it's bigger than that, because we're going to have to go back to the drawing board, and we're going to have to make some really, really tough cuts. And that's all, $1.2 million is hard to find in that budget when we've been cutting that much every year for the last 4 years.
Another example for this year, for example, I think when explaining about the AIG teachers, in the past, we've been able to be flexible so that we could put them on the state, because they're the highest paid teachers. But this year, the state would not allow us to do that. They have to be paid from local funds. So that in itself did a big cut in what we're going to have to pay in those AIG salaries. And we want to be able to serve not only the children at the bottom of the totem pole, but those at the top also. And so already we've had to place 5 of our AIG teachers back into the classroom.
And just a correction, Madam Chair,
Okay.
the 800,000 impact of that legislative adjustment, those salaries have to come out of the federal categorical fund, the state categorical funds, not local funds for AIG. Anyone serving academically gifted students must come out of that categorical fund from the state. So the equivalent of that, us losing the latitude of where we place those teachers, has equated to an $800,000 shortfall for us this coming year. And we've had to downsize our AIG teachers as a result.
And Ms. Bellfield,
Okay, Ms. Silver.
Mrs. Edge, I want to make this comment to both boards. I think that we certainly need to understand the fact that Dr. Jeffries has come to us and has done a tremendous job in leading us to where we're going. When he got here, we were low performing, but a lot of good things have happened under his administration. And I think if we allow him to do his job and follow his vision, can't do nothing but go higher and higher. He's done a tremendous job. We cannot minimize that. And I want us as a board, both boards, to realize that. And this is not to try to patronize him by no means. It's just the truth. And we certainly need to get on board and support his vision.
Mr. David.
and Ms. Bellfield, I'll state that in response to what he said about $135,000, the majority of our board's main problem with that entity is we feel like the state made a decision that they were going to use performance-based somewhat in the paying of principals and assistant principals. We feel like y'all's request to us was funded to kind of make up for the loss in the decision they made. And we had, the majority of us had a real problem with interfering with what our legislators' goals were, and we felt like we were always asking them not to give us unfunded mandates as it relates to schools or anything else. And we almost felt like had we allotted those funds to make up that difference, we were really doing the reverse of what we have asked them so many times not to do. That was our real concern with that particular request.
That's more than fair. And I think we broached the topic by saying that we fully understood that this is a issue not of the commissioners making. However, for our schools, if you're talking about retaining talent in a district that's struggling to pull itself out of the sanctions associated with being a low performing district, talent matters. And when you have discussions about assistant principals and principals separate from teachers, I think it's really a fallacy. In my belief and in my experience as a former classroom teacher, assistant principals and principals were a fundamental support to my development. And when I look at the structure of our teacher workforce, we're getting increasing numbers of teachers who come from non-traditional paths. That requires more support, not less. So we're really at an apex moment as a district and as a state. And I think if the legislature fully understood the impacts of this, we wouldn't hear the banter about a legislative fix. But while we're waiting on that to happen, we're going to lose talent. And but we appreciate you all entertaining the request. But I want to strongly impress that teachers and administrators are not separate units. We're all one and the same. And as a teacher, and the teachers in our district are tremendously supported by the assistant principals and principals that they work with on a daily basis. It's not just discipline and safety, that's a fundamental support, but in terms of learning and honing your craft, I couldn't have done it without the principals and assistant principals that influenced me.
Any more questions?
Just a comment to the chair. Mr. Davis, you made a point earlier as far as reviewing the budgets. While you're completing and formalizing the budget, I think it's on June 4th. You guys say you're gonna finalize it on June 4th?
Our public hearing is
Presentation on May 21st, and then the public hearing is June.
after the public hearing, we can approve the budget at any time moving
Prior to June
to the
30th.
end of June.
But if I heard you also, that you said at any point in time during the process of the year, you can go and do modifications to that. Is that not it?
We can always do modifications to our budget during the school with budget amendments.
Okay, thank you.
And that means moving funding out of our fund balance to an appropriation line.
Okay.
I just left a physical class put on by the Institute of Government, so it's just fresh in my mind.
Oh,
What we
okay.
can do.
You know, I appreciate you bringing that up because that reminds me of something that Susan helped me with this, that could happen. You know, one thing that could happen is the legislature will go in and fund those principals and assistant principals. They haven't decided that yet. They did it this year, they might do it next year. So that's
And truly,
that's something that
being,
happens.
I think that's where y'all need to be
Right,
concentrating on.
right.
Because it's their creative cause.
Yes.
But again, I just feel like for us to get in it, we're almost telling them guys, we think you made a mistake, and we just generally don't like to tell those guys, we think you made a mistake.
And I appreciate that. The point that I want to put out right now, because come August 1st, we're going to be hiring, probably as soon as we get, we're going to be hiring teachers, teacher assistants, personnel for next year. And a lot of some of our budget, significant amount of our budget is from federal government. And invariably, it's October before we really find out what our funding is from the federal government. But we've already got these people in place. And we could be cut, you know, at that point. That's when I think we might have to come back and talk to you a little bit, because these people are already on our payroll. We just can't fire them, and they'll be working with our kids. So there's a possibility that could happen. It might not. But from what I'm reading, some of that federal money is going to be diverted, could be diverted into vouchers. And that would hurt us tremendously, because we get a high dollar amount from our federal government in the school system.
Ms. Bullock?
Federal physical
Wait a
year.
minute, is Ms.
Excuse
Bullock
me.
and then Ms. Belfield?
I was just, really don't even need to come. Federal physical year starts October 1, every year.
I would just like to say, listening to the conversation, and I do agree that this is a problem that was made by our legislators, and I think part of it is because they really didn't understand the role and the necessities of having principals and APs. What I would ask is that as we, as school boards lobby the legislators for a fix to undo this issue, that we could ask you if you would also do the same thing while we're lobbying them to do a fix, if you would also join in with us in requesting that. I think that would go a long way as well. Because this issue, I'm sorry.
I think we've already done it.
You have, yeah, and I think, thank you, and I think this is something that is ongoing. I know, I've sent letters and letters and letters, and then after a while, I stop because I don't see any change at all. But then I start back again, so it's not something we can do and stop. So we do appreciate it, and please continue, please help us.
I'd also
because
like
our
to ask
people
you
need
to
it.
lobby for the teachers that get a master's degree and higher level education. They've taken that away too.
Right,
That's fair.
right, that's
For
true.
everybody,
Everybody.
teachers, principals,
I've
anybody.
never heard that, but I
Yeah,
guess
everybody.
you guys are aware of that.
Yeah,
Right.
doctorates.
Sage, I just wanted to make a short comment. I want to piggyback on what Mrs. Bullard said. I think the beauty of this dialogue here is the fact that legislators are doing things perhaps that I know we don't agree with, but I'm glad that we had the opportunity to sit down and talk like county commissioners to the extent that if the legislators do not take care of our principals and assistant principals, you've heard the call, the clarion call here that we need the money to make sure that they're taken care of. So thank you for listening, and I'm sure that you'll do the right thing.
Yeah. Let me,
Mr.
Yeah.
Belfield?
let me mention one thing about your legislators, is that they have research teams that work on these issues. And somehow, I guess we needed to tap into them, because what information they bring back to them, based on what they hear from home, they come up with legislation that governs education. And of course, even sometimes they have a difference with the state board of education, and they get into issues. But that's what they have up there. They don't just act
No.
out of their own individual mind. I mean, some of them have individual issues.
They have their own agendas.
Yeah, some of them have individual agendas, but in the final outcome, those researchers, their staff, which they hire people that's capable of doing good research, many of them degrees come along those areas. And most cases, what comes out in legislation is the results of what has been put together by their staff.
I think in an ideal sense, that would be the case, but unfortunately, many of those researchers are in the guise of lobbyists
Right.
who've been funded
That's a good point.
at a heavy rate, and they have an absolute agenda that they are pushing. So the research is skewed, Commissioner, respectfully.
Yeah.
But what you've articulated is what we would hope to happen in an ideal case. But in many instances, those are lobbyists that are giving those talking points and providing the so-called research.
Well, the basic lobbyists get after the one that's gonna make the law, which is the representatives and senators up there.
I think we've had a healthy dialogue, and I'm pleased that this is going to continue, so that, as Mr. Davis said, we don't come down to budget time and start sharing information, but you will have background information to help you to make your decisions when we make our presentations. You would be familiar with information that will help you in making your decisions. At this time, we're down to number 5, concerns or questions?
We have one, Madam Chair, and it's specific to some discussion we've had previously related to the early college expansion, where we hit a bit of a roadblock and we were just brainstorming some potential solutions. I'd like our staff to be able to share a potential challenge specific to the deeds. Mr. Davis, are you comfortable talking about that now?
Sure. Got an email from Oakley Collier. It's an email stream. I think in our last meeting we discussed the deed transfer possibilities to us, Nash-Rocky Mountain Board. I think Fire Marshal's office inquired with the Department of Insurance if we transfer the deed over. It would go from, I guess, business education to K-12, which would require us to install sprinklers in that facility.
And that sprinkler system blows the budget out of the water, does it not, Mr.
We haven't
Davis?
run numbers, but it's an
Which
expense
Mr.
that we
Davis?
wouldn't. Oh, I mean,
And Mr. Davis speaking.
it would be a cost we wouldn't.
Although you have the similar
Yes.
knowledge,
Yes.
Oh,
so.
yeah, naturally, yeah.
So, and my interpretation, according to some of the email string, was it is an interpretation based on the law, you know, how, and anyway, it's, if we were to do that, go that route.
Well, that's not a route we can go.
Exactly, I'm kinda, yeah.
Have we heard that, Mr. Lane? Do we, has that
First time
come
I've
to-
heard that.
Okay. Oh. I guess.
I don't know,
we-
Mike's heard it.
We just need to look into that. I have not heard that until right now. I understand, why it would come up, but I do need to check. I'll be in Raleigh in the morning with, my other job, building code council. So it's something I can check on, but, we'll check on that and.
We
report back to
appreciate
you
it.
real soon.
We appreciate it. That's all we had, Madam
Did you
Chair.
have any other?
No, ma'am.
Could I just ask
Sure.
one question for clarification?
Yes.
You were talking about, your highest paid people and so forth.
Yes.
Just for clarification for me, if you go into the budget in the 001, you've got 15 classroom teachers that are locally funded. Are you saying that you cannot put your least costly teachers there? Is
In
that
the
what you're
AIT
telling me?
piece.
We're talking the AIG piece.
But if, for that particular 001 classroom teachers, wouldn't you be wise to put your lateral entry or your lowest cost teachers in those positions?
We always do, sir.
Well,
In local,
if you look at the budget, just give you this something to look at before we get
ROTC.
together again. 001 classroom teachers,
in local.
15, that's right.
Uh-huh.
You've got 15 teachers there without supplement and benefit in that line that are averaging the salary of a 17-year teacher. It's almost $48,000 per teacher if you just do a simple math calculation.
And we always do an average teacher salary, but we do put our lowest teachers in there.
So if you're putting a 5-year teacher in there, just as an example, which I'm sure you do, then that in itself, just in that one line item, gives you some flexibility for about $150,000.
It does.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, it does,
Okay.
because we use the average teacher salary in budgeting.
Well, see, that's what the average person doesn't understand if you don't dig into it and look at it.
Right.
If you just look at it on its face value, then you're saying that you're paying 15 teachers locally close to $48,000 per year. When in reality, you're probably paying 5 years or less at $34,000 or less. So that gives you a pool of money to work with that you otherwise, we would not know you have.
Right, and a budget you base
Is that
on
a fair
projections.
statement?
Absolutely
Okay.
is, but a budget is a projection.
That's
and
just
why
one
we-
example that
Uh-huh.
okay.
With that 35,000, you have to add that 17% matching fund to it.
That's
So
right.
that increases that
We have-
35,000.
We have benefits
Right.
and
And
stuff
that's
in
why
there.
it's inflated, because benefits is
Your
represented.
benefits are on a separate line.
They are. He is
Yes, that's
exactly
not,
right.
that has nothing to do with the line, nor supplement. It's a
You are
separate
exactly
line
right.
item. Right.
Because we do, as a,
Okay,
as a
I just wanted to
budget-
get clarification on that.
Mhm.
So you're
We do.
saying
Yes,
this is
sir.
AIG
We were
teachers?
talking about AIG.
Yes, sir.
All right.
And AIG is not paid out of local, but we do typically put our, I mean, it's the lowest paid teachers or the teachers that cannot be licensed in that year.
Well, you've got about a third of your teachers, I think you've set a lateral entry, so you've got plenty of those.
And so we have to pay those out of local, not to get an audit exception. So I have to allow that
Well,
flexibility.
you don't pay all your lateral entry out of local, do you?
No, sir, because most of them are, we can get a one-year license.
Yeah.
But at the end, if they have not passed their test, they'll come back and say.
I thought they had 3 years to accomplish
They
that.
do, but
and
at
they're
the end of
increasing
that
it to
third
5, I
year.
heard.
Uh-huh, if I'll have to end up paying them.
That's not accurate. They're not increasing it to 5.
They're not, I had heard that, I don't know.
Not that I'm aware of, but that is the flexibility I keep.
But it is 3. Is it 3?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it is,
Okay, I just
Are
wanted
there any other
clarification
questions or
on that.
concerns? But that's why we have this meeting, so we get clarification on things.
So you're on item 5?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Dr. Jeffers, again, I asked the question because I need answers when I get asked.
Yes, sir.
But, and I also asked for myself, but may need to get my answers. Could y'all give us an idea of why in the world you chose to close school on May the 16th and have a day after graduation to make it up? To me, and I understand I'm a little bit more politically sensitive than some of us in the room, but you got to understand when you, and I don't know if y'all got one teacher going to Raleigh, but I wouldn't think you got so many, and to be sure you got some alternate teachers or substitute teachers, you could have made that up. But to make that move, it puts Nash-Rocky Mount School System on a list to people that control our General Assembly. That is a list that I don't think we really would want to be on. But help me understand why that decision was made by the Board of Education. Ms. Edge, I'll direct it to you as my counterpart, and you can pass the ball if you would. And what I'm looking is, because I've had many people ask me about it already, why, and I don't have an answer.
You beat me to the plate because I was going to try to explain that.
Okay.
Being a former principal, you never know what your staff is going to do. You could have 1, you could have 10, you could have 20. You're not going to be able to find that many substitutes to cover the classes. Parents need to know ahead of time so that they can make plans for daycare, make plans with their jobs, etc. So if we wait until the morning of, then we're in a predicament for safety. And I know people are saying that they're missing instructional time, but if you're gonna have a whole school of substitutes, you're missing instructional time anyway, because they are there just to try to keep safety in order if they can. And I think that we did a press release today to try to explain that even further. Dr. Jeffers, would you like to add something to that?
Yes, ma'am. The unfortunate circumstances, many folks are trying to cast this as a partisan issue. The rationale for my recommendation to my board is we have 15,000 students assigned to 28 schools. We have 930 teachers full-time. We canvassed our principals, and there wasn't consensus among the principals. I had a principal at a 300 student school that said, I'm just fine. But then I talked to some of our comprehensive high schools who have 1,000 students and said, I'm a little concerned. So because we're a school district and a school system and not a system of schools, we had to make the err on the side of caution, because in the event of that day in question, if we have mass call-outs, let's say it's 15%, that's significant. It could be a school that has more than 50% vacancies. Now, rationally and in an ideal world, we could just call substitutes. But I have schools today, Commissioner, that have long-term subs and can't get substitutes in some of our comprehensive high schools. So these are the considerations, and the day of is far too late for us to try to address issues as it relates to supervision, as it relates to safety. So it was purely a safety and supervision issue.
I'm reluctant to question you on it, and I'm not doing well. I think I better just stop right there. I understand what you're saying. I would share with you that the majority of the comments that I get have come from your own teachers that I know personally that are upset, that is upset their work schedules and maybe possibly field trips or things of that nature. You bound to have some sense of how many teachers might want to do that. And are we at the point in life where we can't hold our employees and find out things like that, and my other question is, by doing this, are we turning over the key to the barn house to the employees and not having any administration control anymore?
Well,
We can't tell them.
it's a loaded, could we canvass 930 teachers? Of course we could, and then we could call a special board meeting but none of those decisions are binding. If we had a 100% response rate, none of that is binding. We have an ASOP system which measures our substitutes, folks who called in and planned ahead. But I can tell you, sir, every day we have vacancies and substitutes and absences that we couldn't account for. In this day in question, we have a marked date. We know that there's some interest. Some of the principals I spoke to said, I'm a little worried. Some, I think I'm fine. But if I'm at a 300 student school, that's easy for me to say. But to your point, could the process have been cleaner? I would bet. My recommendation was based on the best information I had at the time, and if I can make the best recommendation to my board, that's what I did.
Mr. Shaw?
And I think we as a board heard the recommendation of the superintendent. We made the decision what we thought was best for our kids in our district.
The teachers, if I may, they have earned the annual leave day. And even if they don't say it today, that I won't be there on May 16th, the morning of May 16th, they are well within their rights to call in and say, I'm not coming in, I need a sub. But if they do that in mass and you've got the kids already at school, that's going to cause a chaotic situation. And like we do on snow days, we look at the weather and we think, why in the world are we out of school? It's fine where I am, but it's not fine down on the southern end of the county or where Donovan lives. So the decision has to be made based on information that you have right now. And I agree with Dr. Jeffries. I would rather err on the side of caution and not need it than need it and not be prepared for what comes next. And it seems like we will have teachers who are going to this rally on May 16th. How many? There's absolutely no way we can be absolutely sure of until they don't show up on the 16th. And then we've got kids. And we've got all these kids here, mama's at work, daddy's at work. So what are we gonna do with the kids if we don't have a teacher to monitor that classroom?
I understand your answer very well. I feel like the mistake that we have made is to allow our society to have got to a point where you call it personal leave day, you can call the morning of and stay out of school with no consequences. We can't do that in private sector. I don't know how you can run the schools under those guidelines, but if that's the guidelines, thank you for your answer, sir.
That's the statute.
Any more questions or concerns? We need to set our next meeting date.
It works best when we do.
Let's see if we can-
We own a 3 week, what have we been trying to do?
I think it's 3.
3 weeks. Now that,
I believe so.
you wanna extend it, we'll be off in July, right? We're gonna take vacation in July.
That's up to y'all. I mean, again, I'm from private sector, we don't take a vacation in July, but
No, when I say vacation, we don't usually meet during the month of
July.
July. Then we'll have our retreat in June. We go to our retreat in June. This is the,
What does that give you for suggested date?
what's the name?
3 weeks is May 30th.
May
Tell it that
30th.
day.
That's county
That's
assembly.
county assembly day, we'll be in Raleigh.
Okay.
We'll be up there then trying to get your principal money back.
Okay, you go on up there.
Next Wednesday would be the 6th of June.
June sixth,
That will be after
Wednesday.
the public hearing,
mhm,
which is not gonna matter as far as this discussion is
yeah,
concerned.
June sixth, okay, with all the three,
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock,
and we will post you over at our committee room behind the commissioner's
okay,
room.
3 o'clock. And we hope today has been helpful for all.
It's been very helpful, quite frankly. We didn't solve it all, but we may understand it better. And sitting here thinking what I've said, I hope my comments about our ability to change our budget is not a promise that we will change our
Oh, right,
budget.
right.
We understand.
I hope we
We'll
leave
take anything y'all want to give us. Like I tell my daddy all the time,
But
when
I'm
I'm on
not
a
making
date,
any
you gonna
commitment,
give me $5? I'll take it.
'cause I can't make a commitment.
There being no other concerns or questions, the meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.